Nou, welkom allemaal bij Expodium, de laatste avond van het jaar in het jaarthema Unmaking the Netherlands. Unmaking the Netherlands is een titel die wij als Expodium kozen omdat dit jaar een jubeljaar is geweest voor stedenbouwkundig Nederland onder de titel Wij maken Nederland. Vonden wij als Expodium een leuke titel om aan te refereren, maar wij geloven er niet zo heel erg in dat Nederland nog steeds op de tekentafel kan worden getekend en dat dan alles wordt gebouwd zoals ooit gepland was. Er zijn namelijk mondiale verschijnselen die een rol spelen in Nederland. En er zijn ook allemaal heel lokale verschijnselen die een rol spelen in de stad. Gebouwen die niet op tijd af zijn, waar planten in komen groeien, stadsdelen die andere stadsdelen opvolgen. Dus wij denken eigenlijk dat Nederland maken een soort van ouderwets modernistisch idee is. En dat het spannende is om te kijken naar het onmaken van Nederland. Daar heeft Expodium 3 lenzen voor gekozen om naar mee te kijken. En die verschijnen zo hier op het beeldscherm achter mij. Dat is, ik begin even onderaan, de walking culture. Het lopen door de stad als een andere manier om te verplaatsen dan direct van A naar B. In die capsules die dan treinen kunnen zijn, of koptelefoons of auto's. Maar gewoon weer lopen en één worden met de gebouwde omgeving. De gebouwde omgeving ook durven voelen. Waardoor je ook anders naar de stad kan kijken. En je dus ook een andere stad kan voorstellen. Er staat daarboven Play. Nou, daar zit Martijn de Waal, die doet daar ook vrij veel mee. Als je gewoon de stad als een publieke ruimte begrijpt waarin van alles kan gebeuren, kan je dat ook spelenderwijs doen. Dat kan je analoog doen, dat kan tegenwoordig met de nieuwe technologie ook zijn. Digitaal, daar hebben we een aantal avonden over gehad. En de derde pijler die wij gebruiken is Urban Cannibalism. En die term hebben wij eigenlijk leentjebuur gespeeld bij wat een paar jaar geleden vigeerde het metabolisme van de stad. Het nagaan van energiestromen, geldstromen, ook voedselstromen door een stad. En als je dat één stapje verder trekt en na gaat denken over de stad als een menseneter of een stad die dingen naar zich toe trekt, die digest, verteert en op een andere manier weer uitpoept, dan praat je volgens ons over urban cannibalism. And now, because of international audiences watching videos, I'm going to switch to English, so I hope it's not a problem for anybody that we're going to continue in English. For today we have invited two special people actually to be here and be with us and talk about how they perceive urban cannibalism in their own way. The first one, starting to be here right in the spotlight, is Jelle Reumer. Jelle Reumer is a biologist, was educated at Utrecht University quite some years ago.
Yes, in the last millennium.
In the last millennium. For you, that's not such a long time. You perceived with a professional scientific career, which took you to Geneva, which took you to other places, and now in Utrecht, where you are a professor, and this is a very difficult word for me, of vertebrate paleontology.
That's right.
Perhaps you want to explain to us what is vertebrate paleontology?
Paleontology is the study of fossils, and vertebrates are animals with backbones. So it's about fossil animals with backbones. So anything between fish and us, so to speak.
All right. Yes. Well, that makes it simple for me.
Including dinosaurs.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Little boys love dinosaurs.
Yeah, little boys love dinosaurs. From 1987 until actually last month, you were the director of the National History Museum in Rotterdam.
Natural, not national.
Yeah, no, that's what I said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, most people say National History Museum.
No, but I know that doesn't exist.
No.
So that's why. You're a columnist for Trouw.
Yes.
And you are an author of various books. Two of them of importance for us tonight, we're going to show them to the audiences and the people at home, is De Meirenmens, The Ant Humans, a evolutionary paradox, which is all about how humans still reflect animals and how in many ways that we don't believe ourselves we are acting like animals.
Yes, and it's also a bit science fiction.
Yes, that's the part I like.
Yeah.
And the other book has been published, you said, as a special book to complement the program of the International Architecture Biannual
last year
Rotterdam.
in Rotterdam, yes.
And it's called Wildlife in Rotterdam, Nature in the City. Well, we've agreed upon to sit down and just talk over.
Yes, so let's sit down.
Let's sit down. Oh wow, that makes a funny sound. Well, starting with the first book, De Meirenmens, and I'm going to sometimes look sideways to look at my little paper. You're talking about that all plants, all animals, including humans, are still part of nature.
Yes.
Because nature is all around us. within cities, outside of cities. And well, let's start about this idea of humans that we are no longer part of nature, because that is actually a starting point that you need to counterbalance if you want to understand your book.
Yes, well, there's two ways to look at nature. Many people consider nature to be something pristine that has not been touched by humans. So you have to go to central Brazil to have tropical rainforests, or to Antarctica to have the ice landscape, or to coral reefs, etc., etc. But there's another way to look at nature, and that is, well, what is nature? What is an ecosystem? Mm. It's a combination of physical factors like the soil, the weather, the climate, and all the animals that live in a certain spot. That means that in every ecosystem, whether you have a tropical rainforest or a coral reef or Antarctica, there is abiotic factors, or physical factors as we call them, and there is biotic factors, so the animals and plants that live there. Yeah. And from that perspective, there's no difference between any ecosystem, because it's just the surroundings and the flora and fauna. So whether you go to a tropical rainforest, or to Antarctica, or to a coral reef, or to the inner city of Rotterdam or Utrecht or Melbourne or whatever city, it's the physical structure and the animals and plants that live there, and they interact. Yeah. The animals and plants interact, and they interact with the physical circumstances. So from that point of view, there's no difference between a pristine rainforest and the inner city of any major city in the world.
Yeah. And then the word interaction that you use, yes, that of course is a very biological term. If yes, you take it back to Darwin and his Origin of the Species, and how certain sorts adapt better than other sorts.
Yes, right.
And then the Meirenmens is all about the adaptation of the human to that new ecosystem that we have created for ourselves, yes, and to live in.
Well, we started building cities somewhere around 6,000 years ago, when human populations became so dense, mm-hmm, that building cities was the only solution to house everybody. Yeah. In fact, villages grew and grew and grew, and at a certain stage you don't call it a village anymore, but you name it a city. And since, I think, 2007, 50% of the total world population lives in cities. Yeah. In fact, in Europe, that situation already occurred way back in the 19th century. Yeah. But now worldwide, over 50% of the people, maybe now it's 51, 52, 53, I don't know exactly, lives in cities, and the number is increasing. So there are demographers who predict that by the end of this century, maybe up to 70 or 80 or even 90% of the world population will live in cities. That means that for us as a species, the city is extremely important, and in fact, it's our habitat. We originated as human beings something like 200,000 years ago in the African savanna, in the Rift Valley. Yeah. Everybody knows those stories. But we don't live there anymore. No. In fact, I think we cannot live there anymore. Mm-hmm. If we would take the people sitting in this room right now and with a sort of science fiction transport them, so beam me up, to the situation where mankind originated in the African savanna 200,000 years ago, we would all be dead within a week. We cannot live there anymore. Mm. So that means that the city is our habitat, the city is our ecosystem.
And that also means if this is our new ecosystem that we live in, we're mostly adapting better and better to live in a new habitat that we're living in. Yes. And you were mentioning just shortly that the end of the book is a little bit of science fiction. Let's get to science fiction right away. Imagine we'll be living in cities for the upcoming thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands of years. Yes. Would we as humans be a new sort?
Well, to make a new species, you need a lot of time. Well, maybe 100,000 years will do. Mm. Some species evolve quicker than other species. For example, Everybody knows these stories about cichlid fishes in African lakes, the Thijs Goldschmidt story.
Victorian
Well,
lakes.
these fishes can evolve in a few thousand years into new species. The polar bear, everybody's making a fuss about the polar bear that's going to be extinct or not because of global warming. The polar bear is an extremely young species, only something like 300,000 years, when it sprouted off from the brown bear. Well, we are 200,000 years. I don't know whether we can evolve into a new species again within, let's say, 100 or 200,000 years. But maybe, yes.
Okay, so
maybe.
For the sake of the conversation, let's assume that we can evolve. And
so Homo sapiens will become Homo urbanus, or something.
As you call it. Yeah. What will be characteristics of the Homo urbanus that you wouldn't find in Homo sapiens? Or what are the characteristics that we need to adapt to in the city?
I think a still greater need to cooperate, and perhaps a less individualistic society.
Wow.
Which is extremely counterintuitive because we, as modern people, believe that we are sort of super individuals. We want to develop ourselves and we want to be ourselves and we want to work on our own development, etc., etc. Read the newspapers, read magazines, things like Happiness, etc., etc. And you are a unique individual. But on the other hand, we are unable to live without other individuals.
Yeah.
We need each other, we need to be part of a society, we need to be part of a community, a small community in the family, or a somewhat larger community with your neighbors and your friends. So we all have something between 100 and 500,000 people that are our community that we live in, and we cannot live without them. And I think in the future this will become more important. So we have to adapt to bigger, better forms of collaboration with other people.
Yeah, and then in your book you'll find a few examples where individuals living in communities could be examples for us, actually. And
well, then of course you go to the animal kingdom, and you have these fantastic examples of animals that live in communities, so-called
Termites?
Like termites, or like ants, or like bees and wasps. These communities where animals interact in such a way that you can, at some stage, ask yourselves: is the animal the individual, or is the beehive the individual? So if you consider a beehive, for example, you have workers, and you have the queen who does the breeding, and then you have the soldiers who defend the whole stuff. Well, maybe it's this term superorganism. It was coined by Wilson, Ed Wilson, famous American biologist and sociobiologist, together with an ant specialist, Bert Holdobler, German ant specialist who works in America. And they coined the term superorganism, especially for things like beehives and termite nests, because these nests as a total, they really act like one organism. When, for example, you have a termite nest and you make a hole in it, there's termites coming without themselves knowing it, but they intuitively come and they fix the hole that you make in it. So they run around and pick up little pieces of mud and stuff, and they fix the hole, and then they go and do other things. It's a bit like when I pinch a little hole in your arm or your leg. There's cells in your body that do the same thing.
No.
That come immediately and make proteins and fix the hole that I pinch in your arm.
I'm thinking of an example where what I read in a newspaper last week with a big flood in, I believe it was Thailand, where many people living in the dweller part of the cities were actually helping out those people being stuck in the trains because of the flood, and those were people that actually were moving somewhere else because they didn't live in a part of the city that was flooding. And all these people were helping out those people stuck in trains this would be like the same mechanism at play?
Yes, and there's also well, we are one individual as we sit here, but on the other hand, we are an enormous ecosystem. We consist of cells, but not all cells are fixed. We have loose cells that move through our body like little animals, like little bacteria or something. We have cells that transport oxygen from our lungs to our organs, and then go back to the lungs and then pick up new oxygen and do things like that. We have cells in our body, in our guts, that we need to digest our food, for example. Yeah. They're workers. When you are on a program of antibiotics, you start to develop diarrhea because you don't only kill the germs you want to kill, but you kill your helpers in your intestines. There is something like between 500 and 1,000 different species of helpers in our intestines. We don't know, we don't realize, but we have them. We have more bacteria in our body than cells. Yeah. So that means that I'm sitting here pretending to be an individual, but I'm an ecosystem. So where's the boundary between individual and ecosystem? Going inside the body, so going to a sort of smaller kind of organization, but also to a larger kind of organization. When you look at the termite mound and you study all the individual termites, they're not individuals, they're like cells in the big structure. Yeah.
So if we take the city as a new habitat to be this superorganism,
yes,
we humans living in the city would be the cells, or would we be the bacteria, or would we be both?
Yeah, something like that. Yes, because now we have cells in our body that do this. We have cells in our body that do that. We have cells in our body that make sure that we can have children. But also in the city, we have people in the city that bake bread. We have people in the city that mend the cars when they're broken. We have people in the city that do other things, and they need each other. Yeah. So when you're a baker and you bake bread, you need somebody else to fix your car. When you are a car mechanic, you need somebody else to raise your children. Yeah. When you're a school teacher, you need somebody else to, etc., etc. So we're individuals, but at the same time we're part of a larger sort of organic structure, organism, which is the termite mound or the beehive or the city.
Yeah. And then something that might be a little bit different, termite mountains, they don't attract termites from miles away to get to their termite pile and live there. And cities do attract people from sometimes far off to come to the city.
Yes.
And be part of that new ecosystem.
Well, that proves that we're not termites.
That's good to know, yeah. But then, so that's this there is a difference, of course, between us and termites.
Yes.
Us being this decisive species that is influencing our ecosystems, what, as far as I know, termites don't do, at least not in the scale that we do.
Well, not in the scale that we do, but where we build our cities, other species cannot live. But where termites build their termite mound, plants cannot grow anymore. When you go to the African national parks where all these elephants live, overpopulation of elephants, the elephants change the landscape. Yeah. So they influence their habitat. So there's more parallels between human societies and animal societies than we think.
Okay, well.
And sometimes than we like.
Yeah, perhaps. Then this other species living in cities, sometimes we make life impossible for them. We don't have many wild boars living in cities or in landscapes that have become cities. And the other book that is here on the floor, Wildlife in the City, apparently other animals besides the humans are also adapting themselves to be part of the superorganism called city.
Well, the city is an ecosystem, and for some species it's impossible to live there, and for other species it's fantastic, it's paradise. But that happens everywhere. For example, when you go to the African savanna, you have rhinoceroses and elephants and giraffes. There are no polar bears there, no penguins. No. When you go to Greenland, you have polar bears and polar foxes and some other species, but no giraffes and elephants.
Yeah.
So we can regret that in the center of Utrecht we have no boars and otters and other animals living there. But why should we not, in that case, be sad about the fact that there's no giraffes living in Greenland?
Good thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
But other species find it fantastic. So when you go to the city, there's hundreds of species that love to live in the city.
Yeah.
Because it's warmer, because there's lots of food available, because there's lots of nesting localities. We make buildings, but buildings for animals, a building is not a building; it's a rock. It's a mountain. So you have quite a few species that live in Europe and live in mountainous areas. Rock-breeding birds, for example, like pigeons, like redstarts, that love the city because the city is a bunch of rocks. It's a mountainous landscape.
Yeah.
So they can find breeding localities everywhere. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to live here.
Yeah. And then the savanna was the biotope for the giraffes and the rhinoceros and the polar bear living at Greenland. And these are really biotope-specific species living.
Yes.
We have adapted ourselves to city life, which we have partly made ourselves. Would you know of any other species that only lives in cities and doesn't live somewhere else?
Well, there is this fantastic example of mosquitoes that live in the London underground tunnels. The species apparently has been found in the Netherlands also. There's a species of mosquito that is adapting to live only in underground networks.
Wow.
Yeah, because the climate there is good. There's always a constant temperature. There's lots of humidity. There's lots of pools and puddles to lay their eggs in.
Yeah.
And there's lots of prey species walking around because mosquitoes need blood to suck from prey species. And these underground tunnels are filled with people and with rats. So there's lots of prey species to prey upon. So it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then this is a really a special species for the superorganism city?
It's developing itself now.
Yeah.
So it's becoming a species.
And becoming a species?
There's very little time. I said species normally take 100 or 2 or 3 or 500,000 years to develop. Cities, the oldest cities are 6,000 years. Somewhere in India, around the Persian Gulf, and then we had the Roman and the Greek cities, and then it spread all over the world. So now we have very young cities, like Almere in the Netherlands is very young, but we have older cities. And the oldest cities in Europe are something like 2,000 years. Mm-hmm. So that is too short a period of time for new species, really, biological new species to develop.
Okay, so then let's take it to this longer term. This mosquito might develop into a special species which is going to take...
Yes, but you know that Mark Twain said that it's very difficult to predict, especially concerning the future.
This is completely true, but we're not predicting, we're just trying out various ways of looking into the future, which is of course something completely else. So in this possible scenario, what we don't call a prediction, how much time would it take for a mosquito to be called a species?
I think that is a prediction. I don't know.
Okay, well I was trying to bridge the gap to...
Maybe a few thousand years.
A few thousand years. So then let's take the scenario, and we humans, you said we need to be less individual and be more of a cooperative kind of species. In your book, you're using this example of what is called eusociability.
Yeah, you call it eusocial.
Yeah.
EU social.
Yeah.
So an EU, how do you pronounce that? Eusocial.
Eusocial.
Yeah. A eusocial society is the name for these things like bee communities, termite communities, wasps, ants, etc., etc.
So we could as a human,
we have certain characteristics as human society of a eusocial animal society. The major characteristic that we are still missing is we don't have a breeding queen. There's one mammal species that does, by the way.
Oh.
We are mammals as humans. There's one mammal species that does live in a eusocial structure. That's the African mole rat.
Ah.
It's an ugly little rodent that lives underground in subterranean tunnel systems, burrows, in groups of something like 200, 250 individuals. And one of the females has been promoted to be the breeding queen. So
which means
she's the only female that has sex with a few men only, few males only.
Yeah.
And the other ones are either soldiers or helpers or collecting food or defending the burrow system or raising the children.
Yeah. And this
And that's the thing that we humans do not have yet.
No.
Well, I cannot predict. But there are quite a few disadvantages to this system, of course, because we...
we need to get rid of our individuality completely to be able to live in a system like this.
And our sex drive that is still quite pronounced.
So there's these two things in us that might filter out via evolution if we're ever going to be this sort. And then you also use the word black hole somewhere in your book for the superorganism city.
Yeah.
And in a short introduction I did before, we've been referring to the city as a man-eater, attracting humans to the city. And when we think of the industries in, let's say, Detroit, where the Ford factories were, 2.5 million people from the south of the United States migrated to the north to work in the factories. When their work was done,
yeah, but we have the same. We see the same thing in the Netherlands. I mean, everybody wants to live in Amsterdam. People who think it's too expensive in Amsterdam want to live in Haarlem or Utrecht. While the more rural parts of our country are sort of emptying themselves. But there's less and less people living in Groningen, well, you can understand because of the earthquakes, of course, but also in Achterhoek and Zeeuws-Vlaanderen and parts of Limburg.
Which you can also understand.
So so cities are really a sort of black hole sucking in other people and laborers and luck seekers, etc., who go to cities. Yeah. And you see that in the Netherlands. You see it more pronounced in developing countries.
Yeah. And then the relationship between a black hole and its surroundings in universe. I'm not a specialist on this, and I suppose you are not neither.
No, I'm not an astronomer.
No. But then, from your biologist point of view, what happens if you see a overconcentration of a species in one habitat, and they are not anymore where they used to live in Groningen, Zeeuws-Vlaanderen? What is going to develop there? New species filling up the gaps?
No, I don't think so. No. So you just have less people there.
All right.
And more people here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then the future for the globalization in the world could be a few megacities and just bare lands where no animals or where no human...
Where no people or very few people, you always have people who want to live in the middle of nowhere. But most people don't. And you have these mega cities that we have never heard of. In China, you have mega cities where the entire population of the Netherlands, 16, 17 million people, just live in one city. You ever heard of Chongqing?
Yeah, I read your book, so I did, but yeah.
16 million people.
Yeah. That's bizarre.
It's crazy, absolutely crazy.
And then there was a few disadvantages to this new cities that we live in, a few affecting us as a species, schizophrenia, because there's too much happening and we have this need to be present at all those spots where something is happening. Let's skip this part.
And we're busy.
And the other thing that you mentioned in your book is this problem of urban stress on a climate level, the urban heat.
The urban heat island.
Yeah.
Yes.
Could you explain?
Cities are warmer than the surrounding countryside. There's all kinds of reasons for that. Of course, combustion, so heating our houses and all the vehicles driving around, that produces heat. The sun's radiation is absorbed by the buildings, by the rocks, by the mountains, and is then released during the night, so the nights are warmer. And most of the water, the precipitation that falls on the city, is immediately taken up by the gutter system and taken away, and it's not absorbed and then released by evaporation, which reduces the temperature. So one of the problems that we face now in not only in the Netherlands, but everywhere in the world. You see these floods all over. You mentioned the floods already. Due to climate change, etc., there's more and more precipitation. And we need to do something with that. So it would be better to have, for example, all the buildings covered with
trees or leaves.
Yeah, with grass or with all kinds of vegetation that absorbs the moisture, the rainfall, so it doesn't immediately run away and then can be released slowly by evaporation, which reduces the temperature. Also, pavement is terrible because pavement, the water just runs away, disappears into the gutter system and is taken out of the city. And you see in urban planning that people now start to understand that pavement is not very good. So you should take out all these stones and make just grass or rural
dust roads.
Yeah.
So then, taking it to this very part of Utrecht Werkspoor, kwartier, if this would be a future-proof area, it would be very nice to have lots of trees.
Parks and trees. Yeah, trees do a lot of evaporation. Thousands of liters of water are evaporated by each tree each day, which reduces the temperature. When it's summer and you want to go for a walk and it's extremely warm, it's too hot. You go to a forest. You don't go and walk in the field. No. You go to a forest because forests are many degrees cooler than open fields. That's because of the trees, the evaporation of the trees. And these things can be enhanced in the city to reduce the temperature. When you reduce the temperature, you reduce physical heat stress to the people. Yeah. Especially elderly people are extremely vulnerable to things like heat stress. So when you reduce the temperature in cities, you reduce also the number of health problems. Yeah. But on the other hand, there are species, animal species and plant species that love it. We have Mediterranean insects living in our cities. We have, in the major cities in the Netherlands, we have all these green parrots flying about. They're sort of tropical birds. Subtropical birds. We have subtropical plants. The famous fig tree here in Utrecht is a well-known example. Yeah. So you have all these warmth-loving species that live in the city because of the urban heat island.
So if we are going to put more trees in the cities and we're going to reduce urban heat, we're going to lose a few species living with us.
Perhaps we're going to lose a few species, but who cares?
Yeah, well, apparently not too many people. So this is, actually these were my questions which I prepared. I don't know whether any of you has any questions to pose about future developments for cities. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, I'm really intrigued by this idea of the city as an ecosystem. And I guess increasingly you see there's more and more scientists who are starting to look at that. There is, I think, over the last 10 years, there have been founded at least 5 or 6 institutes worldwide that study cities as ecosystems. But what's interesting is if you look at who is directing those urban institutes, it's people who used to be astronomers or rainforest ecologists. Right, so people who are used to think about complex systems, etc., and they make use of big data, etc., to understand interactions in the city and how that works. And I think that's really interesting because, you know, that allows you to see those complex patterns. But what I'm sort of sometimes worried about is, and I'm wondering what you think of that, is that sort of the domain that used to be social scientists, people from the humanities, is being taken over by ecologists. And in that, it seems that sort of the normative question is disappearing from looking at cities, right? We look at cities if they're termite hills.
Yes.
But if a termite hill, we don't say, oh, it's unfair that those guys are only the workers and she's the queen, and we should change something about that, right? And if you look at the city as an ecosystem, is there a danger that we sort of forget to look at sort of more political normative questions?
I don't know. Well, I'm a biologist, so
I have no answer.
so I have no problem. No, that's too easy. I think this is a good question because one of the major problems we face in all kinds of sciences is the interaction between different disciplines. Interdisciplinary science is very difficult. It's difficult to get it funded in the first place. You have to talk to people who use a different jargon. When a biologist talks to a sociologist, they talk about different things. So I think it's one of the major challenges here to have all these people sit together like we tonight and talk together and try to understand their point of view. Well, I remember from the International Architecture Biennale last year in Rotterdam that there were all these people together. The curator was a landscape architect, but he had a large biological knowledge. So there we had architects and city builders and planners, and we had ecologists and biologists, and all these people sitting together there and discussing things. So you end up with concepts like the urban metabolism. Metabolism is a typical biological thing, of course, that you eat food and you breathe oxygen and then something happens and then out comes shit and energy. But in the city, you have energy flows into the city and you have food that comes into the city and you have garbage that goes out and you have products that go out to etc. So you can also consider the city from this point of view as an organism with its own metabolism, and then you see that streets and motorways are like the bloodstream or the intestine where things pass from one place to the other. But I think it's important to stress the importance of interdisciplinary ways of thinking.
And then to get back to your question, the ethical part of the question,
yes.
If you would compare the city to an ecosystem with workers, one breeding queen and a few males able to have sex with the breeding queen, there would also be losers in ecosystems like this, the guards that...
Yeah, but that's a human point of view, a loser. Yeah, when you say
we're still humans, right?
I mean, when you go to these naked mole rats in Africa, where there's one breeding queen, so she has the sex, and the other females do not, and there's one or two or three males that have sex with the queen, and the other males do not. Are they the losers? Perhaps not. I mean, would you like to be a slave of the queen and have to sleep with her every night? I mean, I don't.
Maxima, no.
So. Yeah, but those are human concepts.
Yeah, but that's my point. I think we are humans, right?
Yes, of course, yes.
That's the point I was trying to make.
Yes.
We are humans, and we talk about we have, or we think we have a capacity to evaluate things in a normative way. Is it a fair system or not?
Yeah, but there is an enormous inequality already between people. I mean, read Thomas Piketty or just read the newspaper every day. Inequality is everywhere.
But the thing that I'm sometimes worry about is that if we start thinking about the city as ecosystems, then we think, okay, it's just the laws of nature. So there is inequality, but that's nature, just like the mole rats, right? Where in such a system is your space to think critically, to evaluate it in a normative way as well, and say, hey, it's not only is it unequal, it's unfair that's unequal.
Yes.
And we need to adjust things.
Yeah, well, that's a very difficult discussion. It's difficult to enter it now, but yeah, when becomes inequality unfair? Sometimes inequality is not unfair. It's just the way the cookie crumbles. Yeah.
Is it a problem that you? Do I need to have this? Okay. Isn't it what you said not a problem that people look at it as an ecosystem, but the problem is that what I almost thought about you is that you think that the structure of a termite is almost a utopian thing to strive towards for a human. Isn't that a problem? Doesn't really matter if you look at the city as an ecostructure of an ecosystem. Is that maybe you want to do something with the conclusions about it and put it on a social or a human thing. And the last time I checked, people didn't turn out well, for example, Jews.
I think the ethical question might not be the most apt question for a biologist to answer, perhaps. And what you vote in your free time is all yours. But at least it's a very intriguing question if, like what you are posing, ecosystems are going to be considered not as political systems, which cities also are, but as ecosystems. There's questions unanswered if you only look at the cities with a biologist's point of view, perhaps. Yeah. So perhaps anybody else with a biologist point of view question, which Jelle could answer. For if not, then I'm just going to end up with a commercial break, as we have to do.
Okay.
Those two books, which we mentioned in the beginning, Jelle was as kind to bring 2 copies of these. One has been reserved already, which means there's one left on sale, and you can do that directly with Jelle.
Yes.
Ask for an autograph, and let's give Jelle a big hand of applause. Thank you.